I want you to imagine waking up to the sound of your phone screaming in the dark, the time of grotesque 3:17 a.m. You grab it, heart hammering, already expecting the worst, and you see the name of the person you love most in the world flashing on the screen. Your daughter, Maya. When I answered, her voice wasn't the sweet, bright sound I was used to. It was a tight, ragged whisper choked with sobs, and the words she spoke next froze the blood in my veins. Dad, I'm at the police station. My stepfather beat me, but now he's telling them that I attacked him. They believe him. Please, Dad, hurry. The sheer terror and injustice in that single sentence are something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Here I was, a father, being told my 17-year-old daughter was physically assaulted by the man I'd naively entrusted her care to, and the system, the very people sworn to protect her, were turning against her. They were buying the lie. My ex-wife's new husband, a man named Thomas, was painting my traumatized child as the aggressor. So, I have to ask you right here, right now, when I arrived and saw what was happening, was I wrong for turning the police station upside down to get my daughter out? Consequences be damned. Tell me honestly, would you have done anything differently? To understand the full scope of this nightmare, I have to take you back about 8 years to the divorce. Maya's mother, Sarah, and I split when Maya was 9. It was amicable enough at first. We co-parented. We had a decent schedule, and while it was painful, we made it work for Maya. Sarah met Thomas about 2 years later. Thomas seemed fine. He was polished, a successful regional manager for a mid-sized tech company, always dressed well, always had the right, reassuring thing to say. He was the kind of guy that makes a good first impression. I'll admit, seeing another man with my daughter always stung a little. But I told myself that as long as he made Sarah happy and treated Maya well, I could deal with it. For years, things seemed okay. Maya never complained about him. Not at first, anyway. She was a quiet, introverted kid, very focused on her art and her grades. She was the kind of daughter who worried about letting anyone down. The first crack in the facade appeared maybe 2 years ago. I noticed a subtle shift. When I would pick Maya up from Sarah's house, she seemed withdrawn, almost brittle. She'd always hug me tightly, but there was a new desperation to it, like she was holding on for dear life. I started asking questions, soft ones, probing. Was everything okay at home? Was Thomas treating her okay? She'd always give me the same practiced, rehearsed answer. Everything's fine, Dad, just school stress. But I could see the stress was deeper than homework. Over time, the visits became strained. Sarah would often call me an hour before pickup, changing the time, or she'd meet me outside the house instead of letting me come in. When I did see Thomas, he'd be overly polite, almost aggressively friendly, which now, in hindsight, I recognize as the classic overcompensating behavior of a guilty man. About 6 months ago, Maya started spending almost every available weekend and holiday at my place. When I asked Sarah about it, she just sighed and said, "Teenage drama. She and Thomas just don't see eye to eye. You know how volatile teens can be." And that, my friends, was the first major lie I should have fought harder on. I was so relieved to have my daughter with me, I let the easy excuse suffice. But Thomas wasn't just not seeing eye to eye with her. He was creating a hostile, demeaning environment. Maya started telling me small things. Thomas criticizing her weight, her clothes, her choice of friends, even the way she ate. He called her lazy and unmotivated because she wanted to go to art school instead of pursuing a business degree. He was eroding her confidence, piece by piece. My ex-wife, Sarah, she saw none of it, or worse, she chose not to see it. She was so deep in her new perfect life, she prioritized Thomas's comfort and approval over her own daughter's well-being. Anytime Maya would bring up a legitimate complaint to her mother, Sarah would dismiss it, saying, "You're overreacting. Thomas just wants the best for you." She chose her husband over her child. That's a pain that cuts deeper than the divorce ever did. The night everything exploded was a Tuesday. I remember the date perfectly, November 17th. Maya was supposed to be at Sarah's house that night. She had a major art project due and her supplies were there. According to her later account, the conflict started over something ridiculously small. A dirty glass left on the coffee table. Thomas found the glass and, instead of simply asking whose it was, he stomped into Maya's room, slammed the door open, and threw the glass, shattering it against her bedroom wall. Inches from her head, he started screaming, absolutely unhinged, calling her an ungrateful slob, and accusing her of trying to sabotage his home. Maya, terrified and fed up with months of psychological abuse, finally snapped. She yelled back, telling him to get out of her room and leave her alone. That's when he crossed the line. He grabbed her arm hard, leaving 4 distinct, dark bruises where his fingers dug in. He shoved her against her desk. Maya, in self-defense, instinctually pushed him back to create space. He stumbled, catching himself on the door frame, and that tiny moment of resistance, that tiny act of a child defending herself from a grown man, became the cornerstone of his lie. When Sarah rushed in, Thomas immediately began performing. He was clutching his arm, shaking his head, looking utterly wounded. "She attacked me, Sarah. She completely lost it and threw herself at me. She's out of control." And my ex-wife, my daughter's mother, looked at her bleeding, shaking child, and believed the polished man who was acting like the victim. Sarah immediately took Thomas to the bathroom to check his injury, and when she came back, she didn't comfort Maya. She lectured her. She told her she needed to control her temper, and that she had deeply upset Thomas. That was the final, devastating betrayal. Maya knew she couldn't stay. She grabbed her keys, her phone, and ran out of the house. She didn't come to my place, though. Thomas had already called the police, claiming his stepdaughter was having a violent meltdown, had attacked him unprovoked, and had now fled the scene. Maya, in her state of panic and shock, decided to go straight to the police station herself, thinking that if she told her side of the story first, she would be safe. She thought the truth would protect her. She was tragically wrong. Thomas and Sarah arrived at the station 5 minutes after her. Thomas gave his performance again, complete with a few crocodile tears and a perfectly crafted narrative of an out-of-control, troubled teen girl who was a danger to the family. When Maya tried to speak, he would cut her off, or Sarah would shoot her a look that silenced her. The officers, seeing a well-dressed, articulate, seemingly upstanding man with a minor bruise, and a disheveled, crying, visibly distressed teenage girl, bought the whole package. They were about to file an assault charge against my daughter. That's when she called me. So, that's the horrific situation I drove into. Adrenaline pumping and hands shaking on the steering wheel. My daughter, the innocent victim, was about to be officially branded the villain, all because a grown man was a masterful liar and her own mother was a coward. I had to make a choice. Do I trust the system that has already failed her? Or do I go in there and use every ounce of leverage, every contact, and every piece of pure, furious paternal instinct I have to protect her? Before I tell you what happened the moment I walked through those doors, and the devastating counter-attack I launched, I want you to pause right here and comment below. Tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have stayed calm and followed procedure? Or would you have fought fire with fire? Let me know your gut reaction. I arrived at the station in a haze of red, hot anger. The waiting room was sterile and cold, and I spotted her immediately. Maya was sitting on a hard plastic chair, slumped over, with Sarah standing a few feet away, her arms crossed, looking more exasperated than concerned. Thomas was leaning against the counter, talking smoothly to the officer on duty, a younger guy whose name tag read Officer Miller. I didn't even acknowledge Sarah or Thomas. I walked straight past them, dropping my briefcase on the floor with a loud thud that made everyone jump. I went to Maya, knelt down, and pulled her into the tightest hug I could muster. I could feel her shaking. I gently pulled her shirt collar down to look at her arm, and the 4 dark fingerprints stood out starkly against her pale skin. The evidence was right there. I stood up slowly. Thomas stopped talking, a look of smug superiority turning into a flicker of nervousness as he finally saw the fury in my eyes. I turned to Officer Miller, whose face was still turned towards Thomas. "Officer," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I am Maya's father. I want to know exactly what charges you are attempting to file against my daughter." Officer Miller stammered, "Sir, your stepson, I mean, your ex-wife's husband has filed a complaint of domestic assault. We are just taking statements." Thomas chimed in too quickly. "It was a vicious, unprovoked attack, ****. I'm just glad I managed to contain her. I cut him off, not even looking at him." My focus was on the officer. "Miller, let me be perfectly clear. My daughter, who weighs 115 pounds, did not attack a grown man who is a foot taller and twice her weight. He assaulted her. Look at her arm." I pointed to the bruises. "Those are his fingerprints. She defended herself after he threw a glass at her head. Now, you have a choice. You can continue listening to a man who is clearly fabricating a story to cover up his own abuse, or you can listen to a minor who has been victimized. Which is it going to be?" Officer Miller, still clearly in Thomas's corner, said, "Sir, we have to follow protocol. Mr. Thomas's statement is very detailed. That's when I deployed the weapon I never wanted to use." I leaned in towards Officer Miller, my voice dropping but losing none of its intensity. "Protocol, you say, fine. I want your badge number. I want the supervisor on duty, and I want a full breakdown of the investigation so far, and I want it all right now. I'm sure you're just following orders, Miller, but I want to make sure your captain is aware of which local politician's daughter you're about to charge with a bogus felony assault. Because I can assure you, the moment I walk out of here with my daughter, I will be calling my friend, the mayor, and my attorney, and this will become a very, very public incident." Thomas was watching me now, his mouth slightly open, the composure draining from his face. Sarah had taken a step back. Officer Miller, however, went utterly pale, his eyes widening in alarm. He took an involuntary step back, clutching his report. His voice, when it came out, was a high-pitched stammer. I'm sorry, sir, I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. You see, I never used my political connections for anything personal, and I certainly never bragged about them. But 8 years ago, before I quit my job in city planning to start my own consulting firm, I worked side by side with a man who is now the mayor, and we are still very close. My daughter is not a well-known political figure, but the mere threat of connecting this botched, biased investigation to a powerful person's family was enough to cause the entire station to freeze. Officer Miller knew exactly what that meant. A massive internal affairs investigation, bad press, and the possible loss of his career over a man who was clearly manipulating him. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Officer Miller immediately turned away from Thomas. He looked at Thomas with a new, deeply suspicious glare. "Mr. Thomas, I need you to stay here. Mr. ***, please take your daughter and wait in the private interview room, and someone get Sergeant Reynolds in here, ***. The sight of Thomas's face, the mask completely slipping to reveal the pathetic, terrified bully beneath, was the only justice I needed in that moment. Sarah, seeing her perfect life implode, rushed to Thomas, whispering, "What did you do?" He just shook his head, utterly defeated. "I took Maya's hand." As we walked past the counter, Officer Miller leaned in, his voice barely a whisper, genuinely remorseful. "I'm sorry, sir. I truly didn't know who she was. I should have looked closer at the evidence." His apology was pathetic, but the fear was real. He didn't know he was dealing with someone who could fight back with real power. He thought he was just bullying a scared teenager and her gullible stepfather. Sergeant Reynolds, a stern-faced woman with decades of experience, arrived within 2 minutes. I showed her the bruises on Maya's arm and calmly recounted the entire history of Thomas's emotional and psychological abuse, culminating in the physical assault. I pointed out the obvious bias in the initial report, emphasizing how Thomas's polished demeanor had manipulated the junior officer. Sergeant Reynolds was a professional. She took one look at Maya's arm, listened to my account, and then marched out and demanded Thomas's side of the story again, this time with the detective's rigor. Thomas, without his smooth audience, and with the real threat of perjury hanging over him, quickly unraveled. His story was full of holes, contradictions, and outright lies that the sergeant was all too happy to expose. Sarah finally had to face the truth, as Thomas's carefully constructed facade crumbled under pressure. By the time the sun came up, Thomas was being held in custody for domestic assault and child endangerment. Sarah, shamefaced and sobbing, tried to speak to Maya, but I gently pulled my daughter away. Maya hasn't spoken to her mother since that night. She lives with me now, full-time. The assault charges against Thomas were eventually solidified, and he faced the full weight of the law, not because he beat a child, but because he tried to lie to the police about a child with a politically connected father. That is a horrifying lesson, but it's the truth of how the world works. The immediate aftermath was messy. Sarah tried to fight for shared custody, claiming I alienated Maya from her, but the police report, the recorded statements, and the evidence of the bruising made her case hopeless. She lost her daughter, and she lost her perfect husband. Thomas lost his job and is now navigating the legal system, facing jail time. Maya is healing. The therapy is hard, but she's found strength in her art, pouring her trauma onto the canvas. She's finally safe, and that's all that matters. My life is dedicated to rebuilding her confidence and ensuring she knows that no bully, no matter how clever or powerful, will ever hurt her again. I made a promise to her that night in the police station. I will always believe you. That's the moral of this entire terrible saga. If you're a parent, believe your children. Don't let your own comfort or love for someone else blind you to the truth of what your child is enduring. My daughter is safe because I showed up and refused to let the system steamroll her. I used the power I had, the moment I needed it most, and I have absolutely no regrets. Like this video if you were on my side and think I did the right thing to protect my daughter. Subscribe for more stories like this one, because you never know what darkness is lurking behind a perfect first impression. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. Do you think Officer Miller deserved to be publicly exposed for his initial bias?
I'll see you all in the next story.